Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff and I'm joined as always by my good buddies Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael debate and deliberate a variety of topics, and this week is no different, except this week's topic is the Mount Rushmore of old-time radio, and our guest is John Badger. How are you doing today, John?
Hello, I am doing absolutely fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing great.
We're excited to have you on.
Yeah, appreciate you joining us. So, John, you have an interest in kind of a theater of the mind, kind of audio storytelling. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I've become quite enamored by the concept of the production of audio drama after having listened to audio drama throughout my childhood.
And I will say that I might be the certified old fart in this crew. Richard and Michael are a decade or so younger than I am, but John, you're even younger than we are. So let me ask you, what pulled you into this world when maybe your contemporaries might be enjoying more more contemporary entertainment choices?
Well, I mean, we're currently going into the age of podcasting, right? Or we're in it, but you know, as a kid, I grew up listening to, I don't know if you're familiar with the show Adventures in Odyssey.
No, I've never heard of it.
But that was a program that I listened to as a kid, and that's still going on right now. But I was listening to that, and then my grandparents had given us a cassette tape collection of the series Let's Pretend. And that's where kind of my passion for audio drama grew. And then I found out that podcasting was an avenue that you could create audio drama. So I was like, well, cool, I can just jump into it, and, you know, on a shoestring budget.
That is really cool. We are excited to learn more about your podcast too, or you using the podcast platform. Where will people find your work?
So if you go to like mercurytheaterpodcast.com, I have a bunch of different avenues to listen to my content. So Mercury Theater Podcast being one of my podcasts. And we're just about to launch another series called Universe 25, but you can find all of that information on mercurytheaterpodcast.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm excited to follow up on that, and I hope our listeners do too. But we'll shift gears into the cutthroat competitive nature of our podcast as we discuss the Mount Rushmore of old-time radio. And John, as our guest, is going to go first. John, what's your first choice?
Oh, thank you. So I actually started with Let's Pretend. So Let's Pretend being an audio drama that was an anthological audio drama. I don't know if you're familiar with anthology versus series.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so anthology being every episode is entirely different from the other ones, and they did a lot of episodes that eventually became Disney creations. Like Disney didn't make most of their stuff original. It was like Cinderella and all of these other stories that came from something else, and Let's Pretend was an avenue that they were making radio content. So yeah, it was essentially Disney movies before Disney movies, but in audio format. And I always remember the actors at the end of every episode, they'll say who they like, their actors' names. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's super cool. I just for background, I see Let's Pretend ran from 1934 to 1954. Is that attractive to you, the fact that with the format of radio, an ensemble cast can more readily take on different roles every week because we don't associate their face? You know, they could change up their voice and we think they're a different person.
Yeah, you're not looking at it and thinking, oh, hey, that's Liam Neeson based off of their face, because he could potentially make a different voice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a fun way to do it. And also, you're not limited to what you look like, right? So you can sound like one thing and look like another thing, and people are quick to dismiss people based off of their appearances. And I like radio drama being one of those things that kind of evens the playing field.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, for a performer, um, it's a boon for the 5'2" guy who wanted to play a leading man.
You know, I think the exception to that was Phil Harris, who only played the Phil Harris voice.
Oh, yeah.
And looks exactly like you think Phil Harris would look.
That's true.
Just this big galoot that just
Yeah.
lumbers in. And you're like, oh, yep, that's him.
Yeah.
You get voice actors like the guy who played as Bob from Bob's Burgers or Archer.
Yeah. H. John
John
Benjamin.
Benjamin.
Yeah. So he does not look anything like, Archer, but he looks much more like he does Bob from Bob's Burgers,
Mhm.
but still entirely different. But
I think my favorite thing about John Benjamin is that he only still does like one voice, and it's just like, slap a super spy on top of that same voice. Slap some schmo with a mustache on top of that one.
So I'm sorry to keep on the subject too long, but this is one of the great things about voice acting is that I actually listened to, I don't know if you're familiar with Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So
Oh.
he was being interviewed on that show, and then he was asked to do the difference between Bob and Archer. And while the voice is the same, the demeanor and his cadence and everything entirely different. And then you realize there is a really good acting talent that he has.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Within his identity, he's found, so it's almost like he's playing the same instrument, but just a different tempo, different
Absolutely.
pacing,
It's
yeah.
the difference between a violin and a fiddle.
Wow, that's cool. Right on. So that's an interesting aspect of we're talking about essentially shows that were part of that era of radio, but we're also kind of discussing the benefits and advantages it might even have over more multidimensional media such as television and film and 3D and smell-o-vision and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, Richard and Michael, what do you got?
Okay, for our first choice, we are going with TV shows based off of radio shows. And this was especially prevalent in the early days of television in the 1950s. There was a lot of need for content on television. And so people in the TV industry looked to already existing and successful shows that were on radio to try and find out how they could adapt those for television. So it just kind of goes to show that, reusing IP is not a new concept in Hollywood. There's been several shows that that are thought of as some of the most popular shows of all time that started from radio shows. I Love Lucy was a radio show that did not have Lucy, or did not have Desi Arnaz, as the husband. There was a different actor, and when it was being pitched around to be taken to television, Lucille Ball actually insisted that her husband Desi be given the role. They actually had to go out on a vaudeville tour to prove that they had the type of chemistry that would work on a TV setting. And the other big one is Gunsmoke, the longest running non-animated scripted series of all time, was a radio show for a good long while, which is interesting to me because I think of the Western as a very visual genre. That when you think of the Western, you can think of a lot of kind of classic shots that kind of come to mind. And it still worked as a radio show, though. So that kind of goes to show how strong the writing and the sense of evoking kind of a place and time was on the radio show. Now, the radio show was the Marshall Dillon. I almost said Matt Dillon. The Marshall Dillon of the Gunsmoke radio show was William Conrad, who people might know from the 70s and early 80s shows like Ironside. Now, this is interesting that not all radio actors are going to translate to be television actors, or at least not the roles that they were playing. So William Conrad, who would be generously considered to be a larger individual, was not someone who was going to work from a visual setting as Marshall Dillon. So that's why James Arness comes in and he kind of looks the part and he gets the role for television. So
that's
our first.
I think too, we're also at a stage where we're seeing podcasts kind of tentpole things translate to like TV again. So things are going back and forth. I'm thinking of like a favorite of mine, Song Exploder, which has like a Netflix show, which I don't enjoy as much. And I think you just often have that issue too, where something that works great as a podcast or as a radio show doesn't necessarily translate. And like Song Exploder on like Netflix is fine. I mean, it's doing basically the same thing, but it's really about the creation of a song and less to me about like capturing the image of the person, what they feel about it. And it's like, I don't really want to see what Michael Stipe looks like talking about the song. I just want to hear all the bits and pieces that go into it. So like, it's interesting to me that to see like, oh, at some point, podcasts are just going to be exploited or, it's not exploited, but like pushed to another medium to be commercialized.
The moment that really hit me hard was when, I don't know if you're familiar with with Prairie Home Companion.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But so Garrison Keillor was the main character or the main person for that show. And I had listened to Prairie Home Companion for years. And then I saw a book cover that had the picture of Garrison Keillor. And I had in my mentally, I thought that he looked like not Harrison Ford, but but somebody entirely different.
Yeah.
And then
I love it.
you see the picture of him and it's like, oh man, it kind of shattered that glass, right?
Yeah, like an owl person who had been left out in the rain for a decade or yeah. Well, it almost serves him right, because I think it was silent films. There's plenty of tales of leading performers in silent film, and it's kind of chronicled in Singing in the Rain, whose appearance was very heroic or attractive. And then when talkies came around, their voice did not match the picture. So I think that even happened before the radio folks who couldn't make the transition to TV. So that's super fun. Okay, what's your second one, John Badger?
Oh, back to me already.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one I have is The Shadow. You probably have heard of it, maybe.
So sure. I was wondering when you said Mercury Theater if we were going to get any Orson Welles.
Yes, we are going to get to some Orson Welles. Yeah. So this is actually when he was 22 years old, and he gets he essentially, as his character, has this ability to make himself invisible, and in so doing, he goes over to where villains are doing villainy acts, and then he'll kind of exploit them and like mentally. So he makes them think that they're like hearing things and they go crazy or whatever. But it was crazy to hear that as a kid. And some things aren't necessarily like kid shows, but and I don't think that one was a kid show. It was just appealed because it's that the audio drama and that I love so much.
Yeah, that's when you're talking about performers who in radio are allowed to portray roles that they might not be cast as in a more visual medium like film or television. Welles was legendary for being booked 2 or 3 times within an hour for live radio shows. And I think in his autobiography, talks about him taking an ambulance from one studio to another so he could get there more quickly. And he would often walk into the studio and the director would hand him a script and whisper into his ear, 80-year-old Chinaman. And that's all he would know about the role before he would perform it. But he was in such demand due to his precocious versatility. I mean, gosh, can you imagine being 22 and having your own stage theater first and then your radio theater second? So that's some audacity there, John Badger. Mercury Theater podcast.
It's an homage. It's not shoes that I'm trying to fill.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Richard and Michael, what do you got?
I'm going to kind of stick within that realm of this thing that happened in the 1920s called the Silent Night portion of old radio, where a bunch of stations would, because of the lack of power and wattage, they'd kind of shut down so you could let other stations be potentially picked up from far away. So they'd go through this thing where, they'd stop playing for a portion of the night just so you could still tune in your radio to see if you could pick up other stations and other broadcasts from as far away as possible. Because if you think about back in the old time radio days in 1922, there was only, I saw an estimate, there was 60,000 radio sets in the entire United States. By the next year, there's 1.5 million. And then by 1935, 2/3 of homes in the country had one. And that's just like this expansive growth. You kind of think of cell phones in the same similar way, where at some point it was only, doctors on TV that had them in their cars. And then all of a sudden 10-year-olds have these $1,000 computers in their pockets, but I don't know. I just love the idea that a radio station would voluntarily turn off their broadcasting so you could hear someone else's signal. And I thought, I don't know, there's something very old timey in that, and something very quaint and very, earnest in how America used to be. And, sure, a number of years later, all these huge, 50,000 megawatt stations would pop up and start dominating the airwaves and specific bandwidth. But
I'd never heard of that. Do you think it was, I know back then we today still have networks that bear the names of their progenitor radio networks back then, like the CBSs and the NBCs and ABCs. But do you know if it was like an affiliate station? Like, let's leave some room for the Pittsburgh affiliate to broadcast something.
I didn't see anything about that. I think it probably just stemmed from, I wonder what else is out there that's also broadcasting on this. Or if you're traveling from county to county and you hear, it's the same thing that happens. Sometimes you're driving in your car and you're listening to, a PBS type station or like a KCRW. And then all of a sudden, Bonda music's playing and you're like, oh, okay, that's very different. That are just picking up on the same frequency. I bet that there's just a lot more, with a new technology, it's almost on the edge of like, ham radio or, people building their own sets and experimenting. So I'm sure that there was an era of that where there's just, oh, what else? Who else is out there broadcasting? Who is into this thing? It's the, Apple recommends podcasts sort of button of your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, you would like this too, maybe. But I just like maybe it's just, I like the quaintness of it.
Yeah. What's funny is I imagine at that time, the persons who had radios, early radios, were in kind of realm of hobbyist a little bit more so than the average consumer. So they might have even been aware that some schmucky network was putting out their substandard rebroadcast of a soap opera and was blocking the airwaves for something better, and would have written a letter to the radio station anyway saying, listen, you idiots.
Well, that was one of the things that often people would send postcards from as far away as possible saying like, oh, I'm in, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I can hear your station all the way down in, Kentucky or Tennessee or, North Carolina, let's say. But so I think that's pretty, a very connective aspect of it too.
Oh, that's really charming. Okay, so we are at our halftime, and normally this is where we implore you to download, rate, and review past episodes of our podcast, but we've evolved. So now we're going to implore you to go to our website and click around there and interact with some of the content there, and share from the website to your favorite social network, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you got, your favorite podcast. So in fact, do them both. We'd appreciate it. And why don't you also take advantage of our guest today's podcast? John, tell the kind folks, if they've just been tuning in now, switching over from another radio program, tell the kind folks where they can find your work.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here. So I actually was on your website earlier today, and this is actually a really great website. So definitely
award-winning. It's the award-winning
website. It is a good website.
Malware awards. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's very kind.
So my content is found on mercurytheaterpodcast.com, and theater is both ways. The way is R-E, not E-R, but you can spell it either way, it's fine. But on there, I actually have my episodes for Mercury Theater Podcast, and you can listen to that, and you can see what else we're up to, like Universe 25 and a little podcast that nobody's ever heard of and nobody ever will. But all of that stuff is on mercurytheaterpodcast.com.
Right on. That's really cool. So how long have you been in this endeavor? How long has that site been up?
It has been up since 2020, I think October.
Cool.
So it's still a fairly new thing, but I've been putting out content much faster than a lot of other productions are doing it. And I've been doing it once a month for Mercury Theater Podcast while simultaneously getting prepared for the upcoming Universe 25, which is a series all unto itself. It is ridiculous, the kind of work that I've been putting into it.
Can you describe Universe 25 to us?
I will try to not divulge too much.
Ooh,
but
okay.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of like the shows Game of Thrones or Handmaid's Tale or what else? Lord of the Rings or something along those lines, Universe 25 is kind of in the same vein, except it's 1,000 years into our future as opposed to our past. And it's a world that's a utopian society, and you kind of see the de-evolution of this utopian society, because once you get to the top, where is there to go from there? So it's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with the voice actors, and we actually did it in person as opposed to Mercury Theater Podcast, which is done remotely, and it was a whole other beast, and it was so much fun. It had different challenges to it. It was great to do, and I'm in post-production and just about ready to put it out. It comes out on the 7th, but it's really big. Really excited.
Awesome.
I can't stress that enough.
Hey, that's great. Well, thank you for helping keep the genre alive and updating it with elements like sci-fi. So really cool. So John, now after plugging your site and podcast, let us know your third choice for Mount Rushmore of old time radio drama.
All right, my third choice is yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Whoa.
So that's it's an interesting concept, and it's an insurance investigator, and it doesn't sound really exciting, but you listen to it and you realize this is like somebody who goes from, city to city and investigates insurance claims, right? And then finds out how they were trying to exploit the insurance company. And, insurance companies are always trying to get out of paying stuff. And this is the dramatization of it.
Wow. Could you tell us when this ran? Where about?
So there were 12 years of production, and 809 of the 811 episodes aired. But it was really interesting because if you listen to any random episodes, you'll realize that Johnny Dollar is always somebody different, and it's because they had, I think, 8 different voice actors who played Johnny Dollar over the 12 years. So they spent anywhere between a few months to several years being the voice of Johnny Dollar. It was really interesting, and the dialogue is pretty clunky in that they hadn't really quite figured out how to describe stuff without saying straight up what it is that's going on.
Mhm.
And I've been trying to go in the other direction and kind of show not tell what's
Okay.
going on, but as much as you can with audio dramas. It's a really interesting obstacle that you run into as an audio drama creator, is that you have to make sure that everything is written so that somebody hears it as opposed to just being told what's going on.
Wow, that's really interesting. So avoiding over narrative or dialogue that over describes the physical attributes or of whatever's happening, is it the kind of what you're saying? Like let people hear it, let people experience it. Yeah.
So instead of saying, oh, he shot you, or kind of make the sound of the gunshot and then go, oh no, and then like try to help the other person and audibly help that other person without saying you've been shot.
Mhm.
Because obvious, like the characters know that they've been shot, but you as the listener have to find out that they've been shot in a way that goes around it without saying directly what it is.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. I would say that TV still suffers from that a little bit. In the medium of film, it seems like you can show one thing and not have to narrate it. And in television, I think the small screen still, you tend to have people you show somebody be shot and have somebody say you're shot. So
yeah,
that's cool. I've never heard of this. This is exciting. It almost seems like something that the guy you mentioned earlier, Garrison Keillor, would kind of make fun of, a gumshoe who works for Allstate.
yeah. Guy Noir was definitely an inspiration for audio drama for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Awesome. So let's move on. Let's go to Richard and Michael.
Our next choice is radio sound effects. And when I was a kid, I was just fascinated with the idea of how sound was made for old time radio shows in particular. There was a museum, I think it might have been the Exploratorium in San Francisco, that had an exhibit where you could do things, like put your hands in the sand to do the footsteps or hit tinfoil to do the rain. And I just remember doing that and just thinking this was the coolest thing. And obviously, there's Foley artists today that work in Hollywood and film and television. It's a very common thing to do. But also, obviously, with radio, it was even more important. Now, one thing that I found interesting in doing some research is that you see these kind of publicity photos of old radio broadcasts, and you'll see a couple of actors around a microphone and then 7 or 8 sound people all ready to go with their props. And that actually wasn't the case. You usually wouldn't have more than a couple of sound people on working on a show at one time, but it just looked better and it kind of made the radio show seem bigger and more of a spectacle if you had all these people crowding around and it seemed like a big circus that was happening.
Yeah, so if I might jump in, I actually got a microphone specifically so that I could do Foley artistry myself. And even just this morning, I went over to a buddy's of mine and went to, like, I specifically had a scene that requires a kind of a crappy car sound effect. So I knew that he had a crappy car, and I said, hey, can I go over and record your car? And he said okay. So I get my microphone and I put it up to it and let him start it, and then I listen to it and then let him shut it off, so that you get that whole process. But Foley artistry is actually still alive and well, and now we can do it so it doesn't have to happen right then and there, whereas the live theater would require that the rain sound effects or the thunder sound effects are done on stage. But now you can still make those sound effects like they did in the olden days, but you can now collect it and then put it all together in on your own time frame.
Yeah.
Do you think that they have
go ahead,
Do
Michael.
you think that anyone has perfected the sound of horses running better than coconuts clapping together? Do you think that just for like the last 100 years, there's been someone in a lab trying to just simulate these things, and it's just like, no, just get the coconuts and just clap them together a little bit, and they're exactly the same sound.
I think Monty Python hit that nail on the head.
Yeah.
It is. Those are horses.
And it's funny to kind of bring it full circle, like to like our theater artist Orson Welles, who came from trod the boards and then got behind a microphone. I imagine some of those gimmicks, like thunder, might have come from theater sound effects. Rain and being a tray full of rice or something like that. So,
and you also had some silent movies as well, because a lot of the radio shows would have a live organist.
Oh yeah,
like dramatic or
I want a live organist.
Suspenseful. Yeah. Didn't have sheet music. They were just playing something that just off the cuff that fit whatever the mood was.
That's really cool. Yeah, John, how great would that be to just kind of underscore your entire life?
Yeah, just walking out the door, you have a sound like to have a sting, and then have a sting when you're getting in the car. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so John, we are now at your fourth and final choice. So let us know what you're going to wrap up this category of Mount Rushmore old time radio drama with.
All right, so sticking in the same vein of audio dramas of yesteryear, and it is my last but not least, is Mercury Theater on Air. And you mentioned War of the Worlds, and that was their most famous episode. Most of their episodes went by unnoticed, but this is the audio drama that was heard around the world. And in that, it depicts an alien invasion, and some people heard it and supposedly thought that it was true and in real time. So because of the way that they had created this, I don't know if you've heard the episode, but it's quite compelling for the time frame. And there was a specific scene. So you remember the video, you've probably seen or heard the audio from the Hindenburg going down.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
The humanity. Yeah. So the voice actor had actually listened to that, which had happened only a year prior, and used that to create his emotional reveal of the invasion of the aliens. And I thought, if you actually listen to that, it's quite traumatic. Mm-hmm. and then you hear War of the Worlds that's kind of playing off of that, and it's quite profound. But eventually Mercury Theater on Air became the Campbell Playhouse, because who bought their show but Campbell's, Campbell's Chicken Soup and that. But yeah, so that was all done by Orson Welles, and it's a really great concept of the audio drama, summarizing all of that.
I think in our October 14th episode of last year, Michael chose War of the Worlds for the Mount Rushmore of Panics. Michael, do you remember, wasn't there something where people missed the first part that said, dear listener, this is just a dramatization, because people were tuned into another competing radio show, and then they found out it was a rerun, so they tuned over to War of the Worlds?
I believe that's right. I think I don't think I can say it any better than that. But basically, it's, when you miss the first part of the show that says this is here's a play, and then you turn in and they're like, this is we're here in the radio station newsroom, and we're broadcasting, and we're hearing all of these, when the reporting is coming in as as realistic as it's described, it's very different than like, Hank, what are we gonna do now? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna fight these aliens. I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
the presentation definitely helped. The setting for the drama.
They kept on interrupting all of the music, because they're like, this orchestra is playing, and then they kept on breaking in. They're like, so we're going to get back to the orchestra, but now here's this breaking news or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they kept on going back and forth.
It does sound like they were doing a verite kind of docudrama style before it was common, so that people were just not used to that kind of format and didn't know that you could do that. So maybe maybe they were kind of just ahead of their time a little bit too much, and frightening the hell out of people. Well, that's a really good way to wrap it up, especially that it does kind of tie into Wells and Mercury Theater, and extremely dramatic impact. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think they've said some people called the police. I don't know if people committed suicide or anything horrible. Not joking, not laughing about that, but yeah.
The National Guard had reported for duty and they hadn't been called.
Oh wow. Oh my God, because of the radio drama.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, Michael and Richard, what is your final choice?
Well, our last one isn't a drama, but it is dramatic. It was the FDR Fireside Chats from the kind of late 30s into the early 40s that covered 11 years of his presidency. And, a lot of our conversation tonight has been about communication, and there was only 31 of them. These fireside chats were used as these big avenues of communication to a new market and to a lot of people. That this was obviously before television, and it was a way that he could broadcast a message about whatever he wanted to talk about, whether it was the first one he ever put out was about a banking crisis, and obviously his most famous was The Day That Will Live in Infamy, about the start of the war with Japan and entering World War II. But the idea that the president all of a sudden, that was someone that you didn't really see or hear all that often or frequently, you'd probably read about him in the papers, was talking to you in a very conversational manner, was new, and ultimately supremely helpful in keeping him elected. Obviously three additional times past when he was first elected. But reading a little bit about it on Wikipedia, one of the things they analyzed was that 80% of the words he used were within the 1,000 most commonly known words. So he spoke in a very plain language, didn't try to go over people's heads, and the demeanor of it was him talking to you directly, like he was talking to just a few people, but ultimately talking to, could speak with every household in America just about. And, those sorts of things, these communication tools ultimately provide to be so incredibly powerful. And I think the fact that there was only, 30 of them, but people seem to have this, kind of faux memory that they happened every week, I think speaks to, I can't remember what that term is, that term where you don't remember something correctly, but has become kind of public knowledge, or
the Mandela Effect.
Thank you, the Mandela Effect, where people oh yeah, of course, every week, but it was like he did less than you thought about. And the fact that they had so much resonance, I think, speaks to that medium and a mastery of the medium from early on. And I mean, it also helps that you're the president and you can command all the airwaves, I guess, whenever you, in theory, really wanted to. But who is not going to listen to him?
Wow. Well, that was a really great point. I think of the impact those speeches had, keeping a country out of crisis, or a country that's in crisis from getting further, giving people hope and optimism that positive change could come very soon. So, wow, that's a really interesting, because it definitely is a performance, and it's communication, and it's using the medium in a very innovative way to go right into people's homes. So that's really cool.
He also did his own sound effects too. He would sit there and he had the coconuts and he had the sheet metal. And I think he also had like the slide whistle for when, he wanted something.
And a wheelchair. He had the sound effect of a wheelchair going down.
He put the cards in the wheelchair so it would sound fast.
Sounds like a motorcycle.
Is that a starter's pistol? Hell no, I'm the president. I can shoot somebody if I want to, for real.
I've been shot. No, you don't need to do that. You don't need to say you've been shot. You get it.
That's funny. Okay, well, this has been certainly a really fun topic. But what's that? Is that a knock at the door? No, I was trying to be dramatic. Okay, it's time for us to pick some winners, and I got to say, most of them are coming from John Badger's choices. Sweet. sweet. Let's definitely go with Mercury Theater on air in the War of the Worlds episode. And because I've never heard of this and I want to go out and see it, yours truly, Johnny Dollar, the insurance investigator. Oh man,
what's not to love about insurance investigation?
I love that actors, it sounds like the actors must have quit mid-show. They had so many different performers in it.
Well, it's like Doctor Who. Like, how many Doctor Who's are there ever going to be?
Yeah,
it's
good.
It's
good
12
point.
years.
Yeah, good point. And definitely, I think Let's Pretend that sounds really cool, and it does. That was a great way to establish some of the benefits to performers and storytellers of radio, in that one has the freedom to portray a variety of characters they may not be allowed to with the advent of the pictures and stuff like that they would see on television. So super cool. But let's give these guys a point, and I want to give Richard a point for hanging in there when he was buffering and coming up with the angle that really kind of brings radio drama to life in the theater of the mind, and that's sound effects. That was a real cool choice. So John Badger, tell the listening public, if they're not too afraid from the scary subject matter that we've frightened them with in our dramatic dramatization here, where they can find your work.
Well, the podcast, Mercury Theater Podcast, is found everywhere podcasts are sold and distributed for free, whatever. And you can also, if all else fails, mercurytheaterpodcast.com. Mercury Theater, and theater spelled however, whichever way, podcast.com.
Awesome. So thank you so much for keeping the medium alive. And
it's making a revival.
Yeah. There's everybody has a podcast now. There's so much audio out there.
The problem with such an approachable medium is that it's so approachable to everybody, right? But it's just, you find the few that are actually worthwhile to listen to, and that's where you go, or where you create.
For sure.
Make something that you want to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, super cool. Thank you so much for your time. And this has been the Mount Rushmore of radio drama. I, as always, am Jeff.
I am.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I'm Michael.
And I'm John.